Kayach Chof Ches Adar, doing Parsha. We start this week Torah's Kayanim, the Sefer of Vayikra, which is called in the world Leviticus. In Halakha it's called Torah's Kayanim, the book that talks about the Koyanim. The Rebbe brings always the Sicha with the Medrash about Yaveyu b'Teherim v'Yisasku b'Teherim. When little kinderlach start learning Torah, the first thing they learn is Vayikra. That's how it is in Cheder. The first Parsha Chumash you teach children before they learn Bereshis is Vayikra al Moshe. Because Yaveyu Teherim, little kinderlach, Hevel She'ein Beichet, little children who is Hevel She'ein Beichet, that their air, their wind has no sin, should be Eisek and Tara, and the Inyanim from Kacham and Tara, which are the halachas that have to do with the higher, the more sublime, the more transcendent, the more spiritual, holy and pure dimensions of Yiddishkeit. Parshas Vayikra is a basic parsha where you have all the halachas of karbonos. Whatever is missing is found in the beginning of Parshas Tzav, and then there's a couple of more places where karbonos are mentioned. You have a little bit in Parshas Kairach, and a couple other places. You have some in Parshas Tazri Mitzera, but for the most part, halachas of karbonos are in Parshas Vayikra, and whatever is not mentioned in Parshas Vayikra is repeated in Parshas Tzav. And you go through all the karbonos. You have Oila, you have Shlomim, you have Chatos, you have Asham, you have Asham Talui, and then you have Karban Mincha and Karban Ha'if, all the various different karbonos that are relevant, and so forth. Now, this is the first time that I can really say that something of what we're going to learn tonight is going to be repetitious. I don't like to repeat old material because I'm a very selfish guy. Although it's of course easier to repeat old material, but I like new stuff. We're going to do the second pasuk in Vayikra, Adam ki Yakriv. The first pasuk in Vayikra al Moshe, I did in 2006, and it's on the web already. You can go listen. So we're going to do the second pasuk in Vayikra. Adam ki Yakriv mekem karban ladeshem. Men abhem men abakar men atzein takriv was karbanchem. I had a conversation with you 2 years ago where we did karbanos at large. We did the philosophy of karbanos. I spent 4 classes on it. What are karbanos? So on that occasion, we already delved into the basic question of what are karbanos. Today we're going to do a particular pasuk, but the Maimed section of this stack is the same. It's a similar discussion here as we did then, 2 years ago. But I'm going to rely on your forgetfulness and of course also your kindness. You'll forgive me for my repeating myself. So of course the book of Vayikra begins Vayikra al Moshe. The Eibishter calls Moshe Rabbeinu Vaydaber Adeshem Elav, and the Eibishter speaks to him from the tent of meeting Lamed, and he tells him the following, tells him to repeat the following. And of course the Welt Stolzer gleich of the Vayikra, what is the meaning of the word he calls him, and particularly what is the meaning of the Vayikra with a small aleph. So I saw in one of the Mefarshim, I'm not even sure if I put it into the stack or not, maybe it's the Abarbanel, that the aleph of Vayikra is a remez that one day the Beis HaMikdash is going to be destroyed. The small aleph of Vayikra is a remez that one day the Beis HaMikdash is going to be destroyed. So he's just going to tell himself, if the Beis HaMikdash is going to be destroyed anyway, why am I going to waste my time? And the answer is that in a place where you can't bring karbonos, you have the second best thing to karbonos. The second best thing to karbonos is the inyan tshuva. It's not the Alshich, the Ababidel, it's the Eitzadas Tev, which is on page 5. So Vayikra al Moshe, the Eibishter's meramis to Moshe Rabbeinu, the one that the Beis HaMikdash is going to be destroyed, and they won't be able to bring karbonos. And at that point, Adam ki Yakriv mikem karban lavaya, the carbon is going to be the inyan tshuva. In effect, the person is going to sacrifice himself. Now, let's just suffice to say that if we wanted to come up with a number of questions that can be asked on this one pasuk, 20 or 25 is without any sweat. It's no problem. But we're going to stick to 4, as I wrote on the left side on the top. Let's first read the pasuk. David B'nai Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people. V'yamarta aleim, and tell them. That's a redundancy, by the way. David V'yamarta is saying, tell them. And don't forget that in the pasuk before it already said leimer, so that there's many repetitions. And we're going to touch on this also. Adam, a man, a human being. Ki Yakriv, who will bring close, mikem, from yourselves. Korban la'avaya, sacrifice to the Eibishter. Min ha'behema. If the sacrifice is being brought from animals, from domestic animals, and of course the Mefarshim will point out, from domestic animals, not from wild animals, and they bring from here a number of interesting observations. One is the Eibishter is kind, because domestic animals are easier to hold and to have, so obviously easy to bring, as opposed to bringing wild animals. And even so, one of the Mefarshim, not today, but I saw it once before, this is a source in Torah for the concept of animal conservation, because domestic animals are more populous. There are many more of them, so you don't want to bring karbonos and affect, God forbid, the endangerment of a species. And I saw this in one of the Rishonim. So min ha'behema, if you're bringing from domestic animals, so min ha'bakar min ha'tzein, from cattle or from sheep, ta'krivu es karbanchem, you should offer up your karbonos. So the questions that we have, I'm going to make 4 into 5, is why you have the double lashon. David abnei Yisrael v'amarta aleim, speak, and then it says again, speak. Number 2, why are we called Adam in this pasuk? Everybody knows that there are 4 labels for the humankind: Adam, Ish, Enesh, and Gever. And the highest title of all is Adam. And if we're talking about a person who's bringing a korban, which means to say, I suppose, that he's not perfect, why is he being called Adam, which is the highest maila? And parenthetically, let me mention that Adam is neither masculine nor feminine. Ish has Isha, Gever has Geveret, and Enesh has Anusha. The female for Adam is Adam. Like it says in the pasuk, Zachar nekeva Bra'am, Vayikra et Shmam Adam. Adam is a term that denotes both man and woman. Why do we use the word Adam? Thirdly, it says Adam ki Yakriv mikem, a person will sacrifice from himself. It should say Adam mikem ki Yakriv, a person from you will sacrifice. The word mikem after the ki Yakriv suggests that the korban is the person himself. It should say Adam mikem, a man from the community, a human being from the family of people, ki Yakriv will offer off a korban, rather than Adam mikem ki Yakriv. Ki Yakriv mikem. Another question, which is a very difficult question, and to be sure it's quite typical, is this pasuk changes syntax. It starts off Adam ki Yakriv, a man who will sacrifice, and it finishes off Takrivu es karbanchem, you should sacrifice your offerings, which is Lashon Rabbi. We switch from first person from one to many in the same pasuk, and nobody takes notice. And the final question, which I don't know how much we're going to talk about, but the final question is that this entire pasuk is unnecessary. Who needs it? The Parshas speaks for itself. Why do you have the first pasuk, Vayikra d'Shem Moshe, Vayidam d'Shem El Be'el, and then you could say, Im Yakriv Adam Oila. This whole pasuk seems to be unnecessary. And like I told you before, we could ask many questions. I could go back to the same pasuk next year, focus on different points. There's so much in the Mefarshim, in the Gemara, and in the Rishonim, and come up with a whole new class which would have almost no similarity to this one, using the same biblical text. But we're going to stick to these 4 or 5 questions that I just outlined. And let us begin with Rashi. Rashi is on the right. Okay, and remember, we're only addressing those commentaries that address the questions that we have. Adam ki Yakriv mikem, a person when he will sacrifice from amongst you, says Rashi ki Yakriv b'karbonos nedava divara inyan. They're talking about a nedava, a korban which one is offering to bring, rather than a korban which one is mandated to bring. Okay, and I suppose the source for Rashi's diuk is the word ki. That ki means when or if, as opposed to Adam ha-makriv or whatever other word. It means to say that this is an even volunteer. Turn to page 2 quickly. Still Rashi on the upper left. Rashi is observing the question of why we change from Lashon Yachid and Lashon Rabim, from singular to plural. We started off Adam ki Yakriv, finished off Takrivu. So Rashi answers the Pashta Nigla Teretz Melamim Sheshnayim Misnadvim Ela B'Shutfus, that the word Takrivu means that 2 people can bring a korban together. Adam ki Yakriv, a person bring a korban by himself. Takrivu, 2 people will bring together. And then when it says Karban Chamalamed, I'm reading Rashi, Shehi Ba B'Nidvas Tzibur, that you can bring a Karban Mela as a community offering. So you have three madregas in a Karban. One is a Karban Yachid, the Karban of one individual, that's the beginning of the pasuk. Then the second is the Karban of Shutfis, of partners, even if it's multiple partners. They're considered many individuals coming together, that's from the word Takrivu. And Karban Chem means the Karban of a whole community, of a Karban Tzibur. And one of the Mafashim that I saw struggles with the difference. What's the difference between many people being partners in a Karban and what's called a collective offering, a Karban Tzibur, and we're not going to go into it. So Rashi addressed, really, of our questions, only the question of Takrivu. How can we go from Lashon Yachid to Lashon Rabbi? Now, the Even Ezra is directly beneath Rashi on page 1. The Even Ezra doesn't say much, but I do want to show you what he has to say. The Even Ezra, like many of the Rishonim, is wondering about the Mikem. The word Mikem is in the wrong place. It should say Adam Mikem Ki Yakriv, a person from amongst you who sacrifices, not a person who will sacrifice from amongst you, which suggests that you're sacrificing yourself. So Even Ezra gives two answers. Mikem is Me'ucher. That means the word's in the wrong place. The Even Ezra is directly beneath Rashi on page 1, on the left. Me'ucher. V'chein hu Adam Mikem Ki Yakriv Karban. It's really supposed to be that the Mikem is before Ki Yakriv, and the Even Ezra doesn't worry about it. You know, one of the things that's interesting about learning Torah is what is the definition of a question. And every mefedish, every level of Torah defines a question differently. Even Ezra says the word Mikem is a little bit late. Don't worry about it. That's not a question. But then he gives a different pshat. Adam Ki Yakriv Mikem, he translates Mimamonchem. Adam Ki Yakriv, you're going to bring a card for something that belongs to you. So the word Mikem means from what is yours. Or perhaps that it has to belong to you, that you're not allowed to bring a carbon which you stole. So the Even Ezra addresses the question of Mikem, either says don't worry about it, or that the Mikem is for you're paying for it with your own wealth. The next is the Sipurnu. The Sipurnu was on page 1 near the bottom. Okay, the one that we're going to kochen really on this first page is more than anything else the Chizkuni. But let's read the Sipurnu Adam Ki Yakriv Mikem. It's on the left and the bottom. Ki Yakriv meyatzmechem, when you will sacrifice yourself. So this is the first time we are hearing that classic Hasidic idea. Adam Ki Yakriv Mikem, that the carbon is you're bringing yourself. In Hasidus they bring v'omer razal. But there's no, it's not in Chazal, it's in the Rishonim. Hasidus usually says that the source of the idea of Mikem is in Alshich. The Alshich has on this pasuk, I don't know, 20 different pshatim. On Ashir and on a breg. I copied a few, but it's just one piddush after another. Alshich has so many mefashim on this particular pasuk, it's really mind-boggling. But this idea that Adam Yakriv Mikem, that the carbon means you're sacrificing yourself, bevidu idvorim v'achnoah, with the verbal confession and submission. Like it says in the pasuk, we pay for karbonis with our lips. The idea that a carbon is the person himself. To Adam Ki Yakriv Mikem, when you bring the carbon, you're bringing yourself. And it's brought in Psukim and in Chazal that if a person brings a carbon and his heart is not there, the Eibusha says, I'm not hungry, I don't need any meat, I don't have a carnivorous palate. If when a person brings a carbon, he's bringing himself, then it's the human part of the carbon that justifies and gives value and meaning to the animal. But if a person is tamazeh, sacrificing an animal, the Eibusha says, keep it. So the Sipurnu said, Adam Ki Yakriv Mikem, that the key to the credibility of the carbon is the person is sacrificing himself. Now on the right side we have the Chizkuni. And the Chizkuni also analyzes the same questions, and he offers us some more insights. He offers us some more insights. Okay, first of all, the question of the use of the word Adam. Chizkuni is in the lower right. Adam l'Rabbi Sesagedim. The word Adam, this broad term Adam, means to include also converts. She'em mekablim bris ki Yisrael, who've accepted the Jewish covenant. U'l'Rabbi Sefilu goyim. And Adam includes also non-Jews. Ba'afagav the Adam mashma kan Yisrael. Even though the word Adam here is referring to Jews, but since it says Adam Ki Yakriv Mikem, from amongst you, so that makes it Adam means a Yid and Mikem means a Yid. So in the Lashon from the Sipurnu, the Mashma Mikem Elam says the Chizkuni. 3 lines from the bottom have a Miyot, Acha Miyot, Vein Miyot, Acha Miyot, El Rabas. When you have 2 successive words in a pasuk that both speak narrowly, a Jew. When it says twice a Jew, so a Jew means to exclude a non-Jew. When it says the second time a Jew, it means again to exclude a non-Jew. So when you have 2 miyutim, we say it's a ribui. 2 negatives become a positive, to include the goy. The source that goyim allowed to bring karbonas because it says ish. It says 2 times man. Man is a limitation, so it becomes l'rabas es goy. So the word Adam comes to include Jews, Gedim, and Lahavdil Goyim. That a goy could bring a carbon. But now the plot thickens. Adam, any human being, ki Yakriv will bring a carbon, Mikem. What does the word Mikem mean? From amongst you. Says the Chizkuni. The mashma Mikem b'leim. Okay, where am I holding? I made a mistake. Turn the page. Ki Yakriv, who will bring a carbon. It means la'achash hukav mishkan, once the mishkan is erected. Pirish lecha eichish asu avada beveis. Mikem, you see the Mikem? From amongst you, says the Chizkuni v'lei kolcham, not all of you laheitiyas hamishur madad, to exclude Jews who have abandoned Judaism. Any goy can bring a carbon. A Yid, only some Yid. So the Adam becomes a riboy to include every single guy, even a guy who's a Rasha. Mikem is a miyot. Only certain Jews could bring a carbon. And he continues the 3rd line of the Chizkuni, Mikem bochem chalakti, amongst Jews I made distinctions. Only a good Jew could bring a carbon and not a rebellious Jew. V'loi be'umeis and not a non-Jew. Ta'afilu goy Rasha gomor. A guy is a complete Rasha, mekabim, a menu carbon. You accept this carbon, tell a carbon, tachas kanfei ashchina, to bring him close to the Yebishter. So all of a sudden the word Adam is significant. Adam means to include Goyim and Gedim, and Mikem is also very significant, right? Mikem means only a Yid who is worthy of bringing a carbon. And Dafka by Jews we put constraints, and by Goyim there are no constraints. Okay, that's enough. This is the Chizkuni. Now if you look on page 3, we have the Ralbag. The Ralbag elaborates even more on the words of the Chizkuni. So look at page 3. Okay, Adam, Ki Yakriv Mikem Carbon Lashem. This is the very beginning of the Ralbag. Roy Sheteda. It's appropriate that you know Ki Adam Liyesei Shem Hamin. The word Adam is not the name of a gender, but of the species. Kel Isha. Isha includes male and female. This means to indicate we're talking about karbanas which are equal to men and to women, the same, which means neder and adava. Karbanas that you're offering, not karbanas that you're obligated to bring, but karbanas that you're offering. So the Ralbag says that the remez of the word Adam, that it means to include humankind, every human being. Well, karbanas that are obligated become very individual. What karbanas do men bring and not women? I guess Eilas Re'iyah, karbanas of Yom Tif. And carbon Tamid, they're not Mechuyev. Woman is not Mechuyev, but she's allowed to participate in the Machtas HaShekel. But Neder and Adava, they're all equal. Now, Uma Shehisne Ve'omar Mikem. Okay, let's skip. Go down to Ulazeh. Ulazeh. You see what I'm reading? Where I made my upside down L on the right side of the page, beginning of the line. Ulazeh, 8 or 9 lines from the top. Ulazeh yeh ratzon b'amim mikem. The meaning of the word mikem is b'mi shehu mibnei Yisrael. Somebody who is amongst the Jewish people, b'madregosam b'emuna b'shem Yisala, on their level of faith in the Eibishter. So mikem means somebody who is like you. You know what we call in our culture anash, charedim, erlach yidin, frum yidin, who believe in the Eibishter. And the word mikem is excluding mishumid, a guy who has a yid who has converted. Shu b'bnei Yisrael ve'einenu mimenu be'emuna, but he's not amongst us in terms of emuna. He's not allowed to bring a carbon. A goy, even if a goy doesn't believe in the Eibishter, we will accept his carbon, not a meshumid. Goyim are never close to the Eibishter. They were distance. And in fact, they're far away from him. And therefore, any guy who attempts to come closer to the Eibishter, we should accept their carbon. But a Jew who is chas v'shalom he went away from Judaism. He knew the true faith. And he abandoned it because of his poor character and because of his lowliness. Such a person is not allowed to bring a carbon. A Rasha who wants to come close, that's a good step. A Yid who became far, that is a bad step. Okay? I suppose there's always turning back, but we're talking about in a case where he's bringing the carbon, but he's insisting on continuing to be a meshumah. He doesn't want to give up his ways. So the Cheskuni adds a new detail to the word Adam, right? That Adam means all of human beings, and that he repeats what the Ralbag adds a new pshat in the word Adam. He repeats what the Cheskuni said about Mikem, and he elaborates a little bit more. The next item on our agenda, according to my list, is the Abarbanel. Okay, we're going to skip the Abarbanel. We're going to go straight to page 5, and we're going to do Eitz Hadas Tev. This is from Rabbeinu Chaim Vital. And you'll see that I have Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet. 4 different pirushim in Adam Ki Yaakov Mekem Kotem Lashem. And if you'll take a quick peek on page 6, you have 6 more pirushim from the Alshich. And believe me that there were many in the Alshich that I just said enough. The Alshich had 3 pages, I think, like this, or 4 pages, just one pshat after another. I want to read with you the Eitz Hadas Tev. This is from Rabbeinu Chaim Vital, but I'm doing the last one first. He really, in effect, answers all of the questions. In other words, on page 5, on the left where the Dalet is, the 3rd column at the bottom, if you look carefully at your page, you'll realize that you have 1 column from one page, 2 columns from another page, and another column from a 3rd page. I cut and pasted to serve my purposes. The Eitz Hadas, I have 3 pages in the original, I consolidated a little bit. He connects this pasuk, Adam ki Yakriv mekem, Karban ad Hashem min habehema, min habakar when it's saying Yakriv as Karbanchem, to the whole union of Gilgulim. To the end of Gilgulim, of the incarnation of Neshamas Yisrael and animals. Okay? Oy Yirtzeh. You see where I'm starting? If you're going from right to left, it's the 3rd column at the bottom, where I made my Dalet. Oy Yirtzeh Adam v'chuli. Ubezeh Yituretz ma shehigdim daber abnei Yisrael v'yamart aleim shu miyutet. The pasuk begins with the word "speak to the Jewish people" and "tell the Jewish people," which is all unnecessary. Not only is it unnecessary, but it's unnecessary twice. Daber means to speak in severe words, in gevurah words. V'yamarta means to speak in soft words. Neither of those allusions are necessary. So I'm going to give you a new pshat. And using this new pshat, you'll be able to understand also the daber and the v'yamarta at the beginning of the pasuk. Va'inyin seid gadol be'inyin agilgul. This pasuk is alluding to the whole business of Gilgulim, that is nirmaz bepasuk v'adam bikar v'gemen. That when a person is adam bikar, in other words, a person acts like an animal, he ends up being an animal. When a person sins like an animal, the person can be reincarnated in an animal because the person's actions have diminished them to the level of an animal, so they end up becoming an animal. Left column, please, at the top. The kavanas hakosov levayer. And this here pasuk is explaining Teima Gedei Labinyan HaKarbanos. A great wonder, a great strangeness about the phenomena of Karbanos. Right? The Eich Ruach Oshin HaKarbanos Mebehema. What possible significance can there be in the smoke of the burning flesh of a lowly animal? Hapchusa, which is lowly, Tala l'nicheach l'Hashem Yisborach, should be able to get nachas. V'gam, moreover, an animal is killed and the person is better than proved. It doesn't make any sense. V'gam, what are you punishing an animal? What did the animal ever do? What are you killing the animal? In Chassidus, we always learn right, that the animal benefits from being a korban because it's being raised up from a lower madrega to the higher madrega. But they ask the pashta kasha, what are we killing the animal for? And the teretz is lazeh amen. Daber abnei Yisrael. First it says daber abnei Yisrael, which means speak strong words. Dvarim hakoshim kigidim, severe words. V'hidiyam eina shachete, inform him the punishment of a sinner. Kamahu, how much it is. Ki osed lizgalgul v'alechayim. Daber abnei Yisrael means tell you can do avelis, you can end up being an animal. Then v'amat aleim b'lashon racha, speak to them softly and tell them ki yesh lehem k'tzas tikkun, that they can have a correction. V'hu b'inyan hakorban, that through a korban. Because when a human brings a korban, what is he doing? When you take an animal and you make it into a korban, the animal that you're sacrificing is somebody else's gilgul. So David Abnei Yisrael, if you do bad things, you end up being an animal. But when you're going to bring a korban and you're going to redeem somebody else's neshama that's been misgalgul, that may benefit you as well. That's how he teaches it. The life in that animal that you're bringing a korban, which is also a gilgul, through its bringing a korban, nitkin of a elo reich nechech ladisham yimakim shachaitzva v'avein. What such Adam ki Yakriv? Here to this means Hine Adam. When a human being, kasher makriv habehema, when you're sacrificing an animal, you should know mikem mamishu makriv. He's sacrificing himself. He's sacrificing the neshama of a human being. And as a result, yesh beikeach leiskarev korban l'Hashem mamish. The person himself becomes a korban. It's the human being who sinned that's being the korban. So Adam, the way David Abnei Yisrael tell you, listen, if you don't behave, you're going to become an animal. But give him a consolation. Adam ki Yakriv, but he brings a korban. Mikem korban la'avaya. He's sacrificing somebody like himself, the neshama of another human being, which was nizgalgal in an animal, is being raised up, and as a result, he too is becoming a korban Hashem. So the words fit bidiyuk, precisely. And what's the word Adam? The human being is bringing a korban of an animal and really is sacrificing himself. Therefore also, it will affect an atonement in the person bringing the korban. Ki yan tikin as a nefesh achetas asher bekorban. Now, when you sacrifice an animal, and inside the animal is a gilgul of another human being, and you're correcting that neshama, since you're helping another yid's neshama have an aliyah, you too are being corrected for your averis. And then he goes on to explain, but it depends what kind of an avera you did. If you do big averis, you mean it's gagul and treifa animals. Treifa animals can't pick up on us. If you did little avedas, they give you a skagel and a kosher animal and dafka a tomim, nishkin balmum, which can bring a curb. So he says that the way you read this pasuk is it's all about gilgulim. Daber abnei Yisrael, you should know you may end up in a gilgul. Yamarta aleim, and the eitzah is that when you bring a curb, you're being made somebody else's neshama, and as a result, it'll bring a tikkun for yourself as well. It's a sheine pshetel, huh? It's a very interesting pshat. Now go back to your right, and let's read the first pshat of the eitzah das tev. This is the pshat I told you before, that the small aleph of Vayikra is a remez, that one day the Beis HaMikdash is going to be destroyed. And if you look 9 lines from the bottom, page Kuf Chav Beis, 9 lines from the bottom, it says V'im Teimar Im Kain, which is a vertical line. The question is, Lashav Kalinu Kechenu B'Mais HaMishkan, we're wasting our efforts in building the Mishkan, because it will for sure be destroyed. Ki Adam ein tzaddik ba'aras. There's no human being who's righteous enough on the land. Who does good and doesn't sin. Right? So you're telling a person, here's a chayin, one day the Beis Mikdash is going to be destroyed. Thank you very much for the good news. Of course it's going to be destroyed. People are not perfect. Eventually they're going to sin. And the answer is, the Eibishter tells him, Adam ki Yakriv v'geimen v'idiyeh inyan ha'karbanos. He teaches him about karbanos, which means two things. Number one, the message of karbanos is even when a Jew sins, he can still come close to the Eibishter. As the pasuk says, Shuva Yisrael Abba Vaya Lekecha, that a Yid could do tshuva and bring himself closer to the Eibishter. In other words, and the Beis HaMikdash won't be destroyed. So even though it says in pasuk Aleph, Vayikra al Meish, mean to say that now the Beis HaMikdash is here, one day the Beis HaMikdash may not be here. The Eibishter says in the second pasuk, Adam ki Yakriv, a Yid can always bring himself close. Like you said before, and then he concludes, incidentally, he also teaches us, so long as he didn't bring the two daily offerings, the Beis HaMikdash will not be destroyed. So Adam ki Yakriv, the message is that even though we learned in Pasuk Aleph, a remes, that when you didn't do Avedis, it's going to bring about the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, you can always do tshuva. Base, second column, at the bottom. Okay? You see what I'm reading? Second column at the bottom. A man who sins, a human being who sins. When the Beis HaMikdash is not standing, what can that person do to effect an atonement? And the answer is, the Eibishter is teaching him. Top of the third column, when there will be a Beis HaMikdash. I'm sorry, when the Beis HaMikdash is going to be destroyed, Yakriv es domoy atzmei ves chelben. Sacrifice your own blood and your own flesh. V'nimtzan, as a result, ki mikem upsarchem atem akrivim. You're sacrificing yourself. How? Al yedei atainis, through a fast. Ki niske v'sever hazeh, like it says in Kabbalah. So Adam ki Yakriv mikem. There's a concept of a person sacrificing himself, which is called Lashon Gemara miyat chalbi v'dami, by fasting and so forth and so on. And then he says, "V'nikra karban la'avaya." 5 lines up. This is the best carbon. It's called the carbon to shem avaya. Ki carbon min habehema. When you bring a carbon from an animal, bisman beis hamikdash kayim u'geruah meid. Sacrificing an animal is a much lower level, which is called karban chem. It's not called carbon la'avaya. When a person brings a tainus, it's called carbon la'avaya. So listen to this. David Abnei Yisrael tell the Jewish people, v'amant aleim, and reveal to them, Adam ki Yakriv mikem carbon la'Hashem, that where there's no Beis HaMikdash you can do tshuva, and when you do tshuva and you fast, not only bringing a carbon, you're bringing a carbon la'avaya. What about when the Beis HaMikdash is yes standing, and you're bringing a carbon min habehem? What happens then? What happens when a person brings a carbon min habehema, min habakar, min hatzain? It tells us takriv es karbanchem. It's a carbon. It's yours. It's not the Eibishter's. When you sacrifice yourself, that's carbon la'avaya. When you bring a regular conventional carbon, it's karbanchem. It's not a carbon la'avaya. Now, you know what it says in Tanya and in Hasidus and Tashturim, that it's not the pshat that tshuva takes the place of karbanos. Tshuva supersedes karbanis, because karbanis, as a rule, there are very few exceptions, but as a rule, is only brought for shegig. Aveda is not done on purpose. And the whole idea of tshuva, that's mechaper even for zdeinis, which there is no equal to in the Beis HaMikdash. So it's first of all, it's a more meaningful gift. That's why it's called karban la'Hashem and not karbanchem. And second of all, it can atone even for things we do on purpose. Okay? And now goes the third interpretation of the Eitzadas Tev. Another pshat. So we're going to have a total of 4 interpretations of this pasuk according to the Chaim Vital. Adam. Okay. He says, look where I circled the word. Adam hameira al shehu tzadik. Adam means the highest kind of human being, which is an allusion to one who is righteous, someone who is a tzaddik. Hanikir Adam, shehu yeser me'ula, which is higher than ish, gever, and ketzer. So afal b shemevi korban behema, when a yid who's a tzaddik brings a korban, yechashav kilu atzmehu makir, it's though he's bringing himself. If you're in the madrega of a tzaddik, every korban that you bring is the equivalent of sacrificing yourself, and it's called korban l'Hashem. Go down to my vertical line. Avo. However, in Boa Lachet, if a person is bringing a korban for a sin, the person has done the acts of an animal, then the sacrifice is not sacrificing yourself, but it's sacrificing an animal. When you're at tzaddik, you're bringing a korban, you are sacrificing yourself. Why? Because you don't have to bring a korban. When your Baal Tshuva is bringing a korban, since you need the korban for yourself, so the korban becomes a selfish endeavor, a selfish pursuit, a selfish priority. Therefore, when your Adam ki Yakriv mikem is korban l'Hashem. When a person is like bringing a physical korban, but he's never the regel of a tzaddik, he doesn't need a korban, so the korban is for the Eibishter. But when he does need the korban, min ha-behema, the person has done an aveda and acted like an animal, needs the korban, then it's takriv was karbanchem, the korban is benefiting himself. Which, again, it doesn't answer all of our questions, but it answers a considerable number of them. Turn to page 6. On page 6 we have Meisha Alshich. And you have over here 6 different interpretations of the Alshich. And pretty much in all of them, he doesn't only explain the words Adam ki Yakriv mikem takriv was karbanchem, but he also explains the words Dabra b'nei Yisro v'yamarta aleim. He goes into all of those different intricacies. I gave you Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dal, Heva. We don't have time to do all of them. We'll start from Gimel, I guess. One of the issues that the Alshich introduces to this whole discourse is the concept of Arvus. Arvus means interdependence. Every Jew is responsible for every other Jew. So when one Yid does an Aveda, every Jew is responsible. And that's how he explains Adam ki Yakriv mikem. When a Yid brings a korban, takrivu es korbanchem, the korban of everybody, he connects it to the inyan of Arvus. And he has a number of different spins. But remember, he also focuses on the beginning of the pasuk. David b'nei Yisrael is considered Gvura words. V'yamarta aleim is considered Chesed words. So look on page 6, third column from the right. That means on page Gimel. Oid yitochen b'sum leiv. If you'll examine, elikonsi b'loshen yochid Adam ki Yakriv. He starts out in singular, a man who will bring a korban. V'tzeisei b'loshen rab, and he concludes in plural. Takrivu es karbanchem. V'hu, says the Alshich, the idea is as follows. Ki Amar Elikim, the Eibishter says 2 things. First of all, Dabar b'nei Yisrael divrei koshi, speak to the Jews severe words. V'shuv v'amat aleim divrei chiba, and then speak to them soft words. This is how you read it. V'akoshihu, the severe words are Adam ki Yakriv mikem. When one human being brings a korban from the whole community, that's a criticism. What's the criticism? Kleimar, Echad miklalus merubim, one of many. Shu miklaluschem, which is amongst all of you. Hu haroi sheyakriv va'akablenu. It would be appropriate if one person does an aveda that I should accept his korban. Kleimar, achloi ki yechtu rabim, but not if many people sin. Because if a lot of people sin, I will not accept a korban of a sin done by many. The sin of many is too severe. So Adam ki Yakriv mikem. One Yid does an Aveda, Hashem says, I'll forgive you. But if many would do an Aveda, I won't forgive you. So the severe words are Adam ki Yakriv mikem. Only one Jew should be forgiven. But then he says, Ve'im kol zeh, nevertheless, Hineni shava eimah, the pasuk finishes, Shafilu shal rabim le'agoyel, but even if many do an Aveda, I'll forgive them also. And that's the meaning of min ha-behema, takrivu es karbanchem shal rabim. So the way you read the pasuk is as follows. David b'nei Yisrael tell the Jewish people Gvura words. Adam ki Yakriv mikem. Only when one Jew has an Aveda, for which is bringing a korban, should I accept it. Then v'amat aleim, sweet words, takrivu es karbanchem, even if many of you have sinned, I'll forgive the whole lot. Look at the next paragraph, please. Next paragraph. Oy yoymar Adam v'chulu inyin kol Yisrael arevim zeh lo zeh. The notion of guarantor, of interdependence between one yid and another. Says he, see what I'm reading? The sin of one is the sin of many. Especially those who were supposed to criticize him and redirect him and so forth. Now go down to the 6th line. And this is the pshat. Adam ki Yakriv. One man doesn't have it. Shehu al chet. One person sinned. But you should know hini mikem. It's everybody's sin. Nimshach lei. Zeh shehu tzach lahakriv. Everybody is the reason he has to bring this carbon. Shalai his heart amazed you didn't give him musar. To be sure, you all have to bring a carbon. One person's carbon should not suffice. So what's the taich? David Abnei Yisrael Hashem says severe words. Adam ki Yakriv mikem. When one yid brings a carbon, it's really many people have to bring a carbon. Then it says v'yamat aleim, sweet words. What are the sweet words? However, this is the kindness of the Eibishter. One carbon for the Eibishter is enough. Even if it's an animal, doesn't mean you will bring many karbanos. Means I will accept this one carbon as though many of you sacrificed. So you have to read the way it follows. Let's go with this. Daber Abnei Yisrael, that's the Gevura words. Adam Yakriv mikem carbon al Hashem. V'yamata aleihem min habeima min habakar min hatzein takriv v'skabanch. That's how we read.
The second carbon is because they didn't reprimand him, or completely separate?
Because they didn't reprimand him, right? And the Eibishter says, I'll accept his carbon as though it's a many karbanos. Oyoymer. The next paragraph. B'sum leiv al roi. It says S karbancha. At the end of the pasuk it says takrivu S. Adam ki Yakriv. A yid brings a carbon. V'yiyah mikem. And the meaning of the word mikem is, listen to this. Sheishaftem oisei b'tshuva. You made him do tshuva. V'al yetcha mushav. And you're the reason he's doing tshuva. In other words, it's the exact opposite as the pshat before. In the previous pshat means you're all guilty. In the current pshat, it's in all of your schus. You made him do tshuva. Adam ki Yakriv. Why is this person doing tshuva? Mikem. You are bringing him to do tshuva. Umakriv carbon of the Shemin HaBehema v'Geber is bringing a carbon from the Eibishter. Says the pasuk Malani Aleichem Ki'ilu Takrivu Kulchem Es Karbanchem. Even though only one person is bringing a carbon, it's as though all of you brought a carbon. And what does the word Es mean? A ribuy. Es karbancha means what comes along with the carbon, and the Al-Shech is explaining the word Es as if to say with the carbon. You're bringing two karbonis together. What are they? Ki'ilu atem gam atem akrivim v'lei carbon echad ki'im shnayim. Aleph Es ha'ish sheishaftem b'tshuva, and Beis ha'carbon matmei v'zeu takrivu es karbancha. Adam ki Yakriv. When one person brings a carbon, mikem, it's because all of you made him do tshuva. And therefore, even though he's only bringing one carbon, you are actually bringing two carbonas. His carbon plus he himself. It's the yukim in the pasuk, but it all fits beautifully. It's very, very nice. And the last one is on the left column, Vav. It starts off speaking in third person, a person who will bring a carbon. Then it finishes off, you should bring the carbon. So he explains that when a yid doesn't have Veda, he's very far away from the Eibishter. And when you're far away from the Eibishter, you're spoken of in third person. Go to the next paragraph. Because this person has sinned, the Eibishter talks about him without identifying him directly. Because he sinned, he's far away from the Eibishter and Yidden. Adam, a person, carbon. Because he has sinned, he has to bring a carbon. But slowly he comes closer. He begins with the Yidden. The very fact that he decided to bring a carbon. If he decided to bring a carbon, he's already coming close. Adam ki Yakriv lashon asid. Through the good thought, he becomes one of you. So he starts with Adam, a person. this person has done an Aveda, he's far away. Ki Yakriv, the moment he decides that he wants to bring a carbon, he becomes one of the community. He's not yet attached to the Eibishter until he does the carbon in reality. When he does the carbon, Kaidei says carbon nasahu lahavai, he becomes closer to the Eibishter kinis kadavelov, and then the Eibishter says takrivu es karbanchem. The Eibishter speaks about him in first person, and why does it say lashon rabim? The lashon rabim goes on the person and the carbon. So Adam, a human being, we're not identifying him because he's a sinner. Ki Yakriv, when he decides that he wants to bring a carbon, so he's automatically a yid. And then when he brings the carbon, takrivu es karbanchem, it's a dual carbon. The carbon is not only the animal that he's sacrificing, the carbon involves himself, that he's bringing close to the Eibishter. And we could sit on this alshich and go on, reading a pasuk, analyzing every word. David abnei Yisrael, v'yamarta aleim, Adam, ki Yakriv mikem, carbon lahavaya, min abheim min abak min takrivu es karbanchem. But it's enough. Flip over your stand. On page 7 we have the Shach. The Shach, this is a Sifsei Koyin, who was a Talmud of Arizal apparently, or a little bit later. And he says two pshatim. Adam ki Yakriv, bottom of the page in the second column. Kishareitzim lahakriv karbon. When one wishes to bring a sacrifice, Kedem Kol, called over. First of all, Yakriv Atzmei, sacrifice yourself. That means to say, lower yourself, humble yourself. And that's how we translate Adam Ki Yakriv Mikem. The first step in bringing a carbon is to sacrifice and humble yourself. And only afterwards it says Karbanchem, which is Karbanchem means your carbon, which means the carbon of the animal. Then he continues, top of the second column, 3 lines on the top. When one brings a carbon, and the carbon is only an animal and not himself, then that carbon is not to the Eibishter. And the pasuk taka finishes, all you're doing is bringing a piece of meat. When you humble yourself, so it's carbon l'Hashem. You're not just giving the Eibishter an animal, you're giving the Eibishter yourself. And when you're not humbling yourself, you're giving the Eibishter a piece of meat. In the next paragraph he says Nachazach, Adam ki Yakriv mikem is lilmez ala milo. The first carbon is the bris, and the bris is bepashtus bipsarchem, in the flesh. Adam ki Yakriv mikem carbon ad Hashem. The first step in bringing a carbon is the bris mila, and other people bring this pshat as well that I saw later on in the later achreinim. That beginning is Adam ki Yakriv mikem carbon ad Hashem. The carbon that you bring lavaya is a bris mila, and after you have a bris mila, then you have in abheim min abakar min atzayin takrivu es karbanchem. Okay, turn the page. This is Teferes Yonason. I've never done this before. Rabbi Yonason Eibishitz. I had this for him sitting in a shelf someplace, and somebody asked me a question from one of his shitas, the Parshas, so I took it out and I dusted it off and I printed it for you. This is thus. And he says that it goes on the Eibishter. Adam ki Yakriv mikem carbon ad Hashem goes on the Eibishter. He starts off like this. Nira Levayat. You see what I'm reading? Page 8 on the right, the second line, where I made the vertical line. Nira Levayat. It seems to me, Dini Yadua da Kadosh Baruch Hu Chafetz Banu. The Eibishter desires us. And he wants to show us how we should walk. Any time he gives us a mitzvah, Hashem does the mitzvah first. We should learn from him how to bring a carbon. So the question becomes, where do we find HaKadosh Baruch Hu Hikev Karbani? What is the Eibush, the sacrifice, which sets the stage for us? And the answer is Adam ki Yakriv mikem Korban lahavaya. What is Korban lahavaya? What is the Eibush, this Korban? Adam ki Yakriv mikem. Aval matzinu b'dugmasi. What was the example for this? HaKadosh Baruch Hu hayamakriv shnei bnei Aaron, the 2 sons of Aaron HaKoyin, who passed away on Chodesh Nisan. Yakriv and Meish Zara. This is the Eibush, this Korban. Okay, go down to the next vertical line. As the pasuk says, Adam ki Yakriv mikem korban ad Hashem. when a person wants to bring a carbon, he should learn from the carbon of Hashem. What is the carbon of Hashem? Behind nishmas nadav and aviyu, the nishamas of Adam and aviyu. Shavhaya behem nishmas Adam arishin kadmisa b'farshim. Adam, what is the sacrifice of Adam? Ki Yakriv mikem carbon of Hashem, nadav and aviyu, having themselves sparks from Adam arishin, and shehu hischel b'karbonei. That's how the Eibishter begins his carbon. Aval atem gam atem. When you want to bring a carbon, it should be min avheim min avakar and min atzvim. So the Eibishter says, my carbon is Adam ki Yakriv, carbon la Hashem. What is Adam ki Yakriv? It goes on Nadav and Avihu. And when a Yid brings a carbon, it should be min avheim min avakar min atzvim. And it's a very painful pshat. I prepared it. It's a nice pshat, and I was saying, should I teach it and should I not teach it? Okay, I put it out there. Okay, and he brings the second pshat which you could learn on your own. The Chazam Sefer, which is on page 9, also brings the same idea that we had in the Shach, that Adam ki Yakriv mikem goes on the idea of bris milah, that before you can bring any carbon you have to have a bris b'psachim. And he brings down that if someone doesn't have a bris, he could send the carbon with somebody else, but it's not the same. There's something missing. There's something very special of being able to bring a carbon by yourself. And now we get to the Chasidus, which is on page 10. Okay? So we explained David Abnei Yisrael, that's Gvuras, the hard part of that pasuk. V'amart aleim, that's Chasadim, the sweet part of that pasuk, because there's different aspects to the message of the pasuk. Some are critical and some are kind. Adam has many different interpretations. Adam means Shem HaMaile, the highest madrega of a person. A tzaddik brings a carbon. Adam means every single human being. Adam means even also Lahavdul Goyim. And Adam could mean even the carbon of the Eibishter. Ki Yakriv mikem. So we had many different interpretations of mikem, right? Including also that mikem means that when you're bringing a carbon, the key to bringing a carbon is that you're giving yourself, or from yourself, or one of you, and so forth. Then it's carbon la'avaya, carbon for the Eibishter. And then there's a second thing, when you're bringing an animal, takriv was karbanchem, that's a secondary union of carbon. And as many of the Mepharshim say, takriv is karbanchem loshen rabim, that any time a Yid brings a carbon, there's two karbanos here. There's the animal, and then there's the human being. Now we move on to Chasidus. And let's first read a shtikele from Basi Lagani. And then we're going to learn a Maimah from the Rebbe from 1982, Tafshin Mem Beis, Vayikra Tafshin Mem Beis, 28 years ago. The Ksiv, the Pasuk says, Adam ki Yakriv mikem korban lavaya. Bottom of page 10. A person is going to bring a carbon la Hashem and a behemoth and a bakar and a tzeit. The question is asked, Yukshe im kavan ho yakavanos, if the intent is rak levayim mishpatei carbon. The teachers about how karbanos are brought. Havalei the name of the pasuk should have said, Adam mikem ki Yaakriv carbon la Hashem, a person amongst you will bring a carbon. Hinikach v'kach yeh mishpatei vos hakarbon velchesa. That will be the laws. The person has to bring the carbon mikem. The answer is Shebo Levaed Klolus Inyan HaKarbonas Baveda B'Nefesh Adam. The concept of karbonas, as it's indicated not just in the practical sacrifice of an animal, but the sacrifice of the person himself. The previous decade, avoided the Chasidus of it. Adam ki Yakriv, and the meaning of the word Adam ki Yakriv means Ha'adam, a person, Kasher Yiskarav Alakus, who chooses to come close to the Eibishter, which is consistent with Rashi, who says this is going on in a Dava. Hine mikem u'karban la'avaya, the carbon has to be from you. That means mikem u'bachem adolay adava. It's entirely up to us. Liyas carbon of Hashem, to bring a carbon to the Eibishter, and the meaning of the word carbon is liyas karev alavaya, to be close to the Eibishter. It is known the karbonas amiyin kirav akeches machushim. A carbon means to bring close our faculties and our sensitivities. And the previous Rebbe goes into a whole aricha saying, a lot of times people say, who am I to bring a carbon? Is the teretz Adam Yaakriv mikem? Who are you? You're perfectly capable of bringing a carbon if you so desire. Go down to my dalet. See where my dalet is? Middle of the page. V'hu min habehema. When a person brings a carbon, it has to be min habehema. Habehema shabali nefesh adam, the heart which is in the human being, the animal which is in the human being's heart, shua nefesh abamis, which is the animal soul. So the way you read this pasuk is adam ki yakriv. You want to bring yourself close to the Eibishter, number one, mikem, it's up to you. And when you want to bring yourself close to the Eibishter and you realize that you could do it, it's min habehem, you have to sacrifice your animal. Now I want to say this now as the preparation to the Maimah we're going to learn on the next page. And that is, and there's two translations of the word korban. Korban means to bring close, and korban means to sacrifice. The difference between bringing close and sacrificing is opposite. Sacrifice means that in order to give this a connection with the Eibush, that I must destroy what it is at the moment and change it into something different. But korban means to bring close, means it's already good, and I'm going to make it better. And in general, these two translations of the word korban are the distinction between when a person is sacrificing a human being or sacrificing the animal within the human being. The human beings being sacrificed is called kiruv, coming close. A yid is already close, is coming close. The animal within the human being has to be sacrificed to come close to the Eibush. And now we turn to page 11, which is me flipping over the stack, and you discover what Hasidus has to say about this here pasuk. And the Rebbe asks all four questions. First of all, what is the meaning of the word Adam? Why does it say Mikem? Third of all, why does it begin Lashon Yachid, Karban Lashem, and end off Takriv with Karban Chem? And also, who needs this pasuk altogether? And he answers and explains the concept of Karbanis. But he shares an insight, which you have already in the Likutei Torah, which is very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Atypical, unexpected. Whenever we think of a korban, we visualize it like we normally have it in Hasidus, like Avedas HaTfilah, like davening. How does it work? You go from the bottom up. You start from the lowest madrega and you slowly ascend. You go up higher and higher and higher. So if davening is going from the bottom up, you should start off with sacrificing the animal. And after you've sacrificed the animal, then the mensch can ascend even higher. In this pasuk, it says exactly the opposite. Number one, Adam goes on the neshama. Ki Yakriv, Mikem, Korban Ladeshem. The neshama wants to get close to the Eibishter. Mikem means the neshama, Mikem b'cham tavatoloi, which is Korban Labai. Then it says, Min ha-behema, after the Adam comes close, the behema is sacrificed. Takriv was Karban Chem, you're elevating, you're being Ezek and Avedas HaBirurim. This pasuk is explaining the Seder of a korban in what we would call in Hasidic terminology, Milmayla Lamata, from the higher level to the lower level. First of all, Adam Ki Yakriv. That you're sacrificing your Adam, which is not called sacrifice, it's called bringing close. And Min ha-behema, when you're later sacrificing the animal, this is the second half of the pasuk. And it's going to answer all four questions. So let's begin on page 11. Okay, the second column. We know that korban means to sacrifice, but we also know that korban means to bring close. So he says, V'zehu emrei Adam dafke. The meaning of the word Adam dafke, ki Yakriv again, ta'akeach lekarev, es inyani ha'elam l'lakus. The possibility to bring things closer to the Eibishter, whom bechinas Adam has to do with the Yid's neshama on the level of Adam. Why? V'ha'inyan hu the Adam nikra kein Hashem Adam le'elyon. A Yid is called Adam because Kvayachol, he is like the Eibishter. V'inyan Adam le'elyon hu k'mavor b'lukutei Torah Parshas the neshama Yisrael bechinas shluchim shal mayla. Adam means that we're the Eibishter's shluchim. Hashem made us the shluchim, and therefore Adam ki Yakriv. A Yid is able to bring closer to the Eibishter because he's Kvayachol, the Eibishter's representative. Okay, and he goes on to explain that Adam is an allusion to the neshama on the highest madregas. V'hinei anu in the middle of that paragraph, neshama shenasata b'teherehi. The neshama by itself is pure. If the neshama comes from a very high level called tahir, on the higher level still, a Yid is one with the Eibishter mamish. The neshama shadish is in the Eibishter himself, and he brings that out. End of the paragraph. Since the neshama is such high sources, And at the highest levels, the neshama is one with the Eibishter. L'chein b'yachaltam, the neshamas have the ability l'karev eskol l'nyani ha'elam l'lakus, to bring the word closer to the Eibishter. And that's the pshat. Adam ki Yakriv. Only a minch, only a neshama ki Yakriv could bring things closer to the Eibishter. Okay? Next paragraph. When one wishes to bring things closer to the Eibishter, the order is as follows. First of all, you bring the neshama closer to the Eibishter. And he brings the lashon ksheit atzmecha, make yourself true, make yourself beautiful first. Then you can raise up the world, including your own animal soul, which is called ksheit ached, and make true, make beautiful the world around yourself. And the bringing a carbon is yourself. First you give your neshama to the Eibishter. And then you give the animal. Now we know the opposite. We know you have to start with the animal, and I would suggest this is between a Beinani and Taka and a Balchuv. Balchuvas have no choice but to start with the animal. A Beinani, not a Tzaddik. A Beinani can start with the neshama. Like I did say that you haven't done your Perek test. You start with the neshama, and you fill the neshama with so much passion that it spills over to the animal soul. That's the pshat. Adam ki Yakriv mikem korban l'Hashem. Only a yid, a neshama, could bring things closer to the Eibishter, and it begins with his own holiness. Okay? So he says you go to daven, and after you daven, you go to learn. Turn to page 12. Okay? Top of page 12. To go out into the world. That means to make a living. And making a living is you're being closer to the Eibishter. Also, Gashmi is the kinyanim until you're sacrificing animals. But to say that is Adam ki Yakriv mikem. First of all, you're sacrificing the neshama, which is Kabma Hashem. And only afterwards are you elevating the world at large. Now in the next paragraph, the Rebbe goes on to explain it in Avodah. What does it mean, Adam ki Yakriv mikem? And then min ha-behema. So he translates that in every single Jew you have two madreges. Third line into the next paragraph, v'ha'inyin hu, where I made the vertical line. Every Jew's neshama has two aspects. The human aspect of the neshama and the animal aspect of the neshama. The human aspect of the neshama is the neshama's source in Atzilus, because Atzilus is Elam Ha'achtos, and V'zera Behema Koyal neshama is the B'yam the Prudah, and the animal aspect of the neshama is the lower neshamas. V'ha'aveda, and the work is the Zera Adam Hu B'chinas Sheit Atzmara. First of all, make yourself beautiful. Va'aveda, the Zera Behema, elevating the animal is B'chinas Sheit Achedim, to make the world around you beautiful. Every single neshama has both of these aspects, and they say that is first of all Adam ki Yakriv mikem, you bring the neshama closer, and only afterwards min ha-behema, min ha-bakar, min ha-tzena, you're elevating also the animals. Next paragraph. Okay, v'hine, v'zehu, this is the pshat in the pasuk. Adam ki Yakriv mikem korban l'Hashem, min ha-behema, min ha-bakar, min ha-tzena, takriv v'skabanchem. Translates the Maimed as follows: Shemakriv kol davar atzarach kirav, you bring close everything that needs to be brought close. Afilu b'chinas achinailas, even the highest levels such as Elam Ha'atzilus, va'afilu Elam Ha'seintov Shalamayla Me'atzilus. Adam ki Yakriv, as close as you are to the Eibishter, you could be even closer. Mekarev Esam L'mayla Yesam. So Adam ki Yakriv mikem, the bringing of a carbon is that the holy part of myself, the pious part of myself, as close I are to the Eibishter, I bring him even closer. Okay, 3 lines from the bottom. And then he specifies. First you bring the carbon of yourself. You sacrifice the more sublime, higher, more spiritual part of yourself. And then you sacrifice also the animal, which is an allusion to serving the Eibishter in the body. On the animal soul, Top of the next page. Not just elevating the lower parts of the neshama and the animal soul, but the world at large. Bringing them back to the Eibishter. And he concludes, now it says karban, your sacrifices in plural, because when you elevate the sparks of godliness which are in the world, each one of those sparks is disparate. Each one of those sparks is distinctive. To help a person. So how do you read the pasuk? Adam, a person who's in a higher madreg. Ki Yakriv, when he wants to come closer to the Yebishter, Mikem, Karban Lavaya, the beginning of the carbon is himself. Then, you want to elevate also the lower aspects of yourself and the world around you. And then, Takrivu, the carbon that you're bringing is Karban Chem, Lashon Rabim, not many people's carbon, like the Alshach said, but the many aspects of the world that he is elevating through his avodah. And the Rebbe, of course, concludes the Rambam by saying that the true shleimus of Karbanis is going to be when Mashiach comes, and let it be taken from Yad Mamash. Okay?